Technical analysis of the back handspring on the floor. Here we are first going to see the standing back handspring. It is essential to learn to do this element with an entrance from a standing position, before learning how to do it from a round-off. The takeoff position is similar to the landing position for the round-off. The arms are horizontal, the head is neutral, and the gymnast is looking down and slightly forward to the spot where we can imagine that she placed her hands during the round-off or another handspring. Here the back needs to be perfectly rounded. That is, the shoulder blades are completely protracted and the gymnast needs to feel as if her shoulders are going forward, as if she were in push-up position and she were trying to push her back toward the ceiling. You can tell her to push her back backward or protract her shoulder blades, or even to collapse her chest in order to make it hollow. As for the abdominals, they're in a tense position, so you'll tell her to contract the abdomen in order to control and hold the pelvic girdle. The pelvis is in neutral position or slightly tilted back, but this backward tilt cannot be too extreme, otherwise it will push the knees forward during the bending phase. Finally, the legs are stretched with the feet together. Here it's a good idea to make sure that when the gymnast rounds her back, her shoulders stay down. In other words, here at the nape of the neck, we can see that the neck isn't blocked and the shoulders aren't raised up to the ears. Gymnasts often tend to raise their shoulders, a bit like for a push-off with their arms. This gives the impression of being stable, but what we're trying to get the gymnast to do is to work the serratus anterior muscle, which is located here, and is important in stopping the snap-down movement in order to help the gymnast return to an upright position. Then, in order to be able to go upside down and move backward, the gymnast needs to be unbalanced. For this, the gymnast lets herself fall backward by slightly pushing into the balls of her feet. As soon as the body starts falling backward, she bends her legs so that the knees stay above the ankles. The tibia needs to be at a 90-degree angle to the floor. The legs need to be bent as little as possible. The flexion actually depends on the gymnast's strength. The more powerful she is, the less she'll need to bend her knees. Ideally, the back will stay rounded, and most important, the shoulders will be above the pelvis. Based on the gymnast's power and therefore her ability to react in the push-off, the back will be vertical, or there will be a slight compensation, as we can see here, with the shoulders forward. This allows her to limit the instability and therefore avoid a landing that's too squashed. However, in teaching this, as you go along, you need to try to get the shoulders to be above the pelvis. Then you'll end up with a pelvis in neutral position, neither tilted backward nor tilted forward, for the simple and good reason that this makes it possible to keep the shoulders above the pelvis. A gymnast who has her pelvis tilted way back or tilted a little too far back would probably have her shoulders back. And this would cause the knees to move too far forward at the instant of unbalance and the instant of push-off. On the other hand, if the pelvis is tilted forward, it will undoubtedly cause the back to flatten and consequently the shoulders to move toward the knees, a position that would cause the gymnast to do a shorter and higher handspring and therefore lose momentum. As for the arms, the gymnast will lower them by swinging backward to the back-lower diagonal position, squeeze together in order to then swing forward. Finally, the head stays neutral and the gymnast continues to look at the same spot. Here it is important for the gymnast to feel that she is pressing everywhere in her feet, whether the toes, plantar arch or heels. The pressure needs to be complete there in order to be able to push fully. Now we look at the movement that will make it possible to create the inversion, the leg push-off. This is truly the number one movement of the back handspring. That is to say, this is what will make it possible to simultaneously go backward and up. It's what will dictate the direction. This is what the gymnast's thought process needs to be. On 1, I push with my legs. On 2, I stretch out by swinging my arms so I'm as parallel as possible to the floor and aligned. And when my arms reach my ears, I open my chest and spot the floor. Here on a standing back handspring, it's very hard to get this perfect technique. It will be more clear in the round-off handspring sequence. Here, the movements are done a little at the same time. Here we see the arms moving at the same instant as even before the leg push-off. This is normal because the trajectory of the arms is much bigger than that of the legs, and the body immediately goes into backward curl position. Despite everything, in all the drills and attempts with spotting, you will need to emphasize this scenario and movement through the aligned position because we're aiming to teach the back handspring with an eye to a round-off handspring sequence, in order to gain backward momentum and thus do the highest and fastest salto possible. On the other hand, it is entirely possible in the standing handspring that the gymnast will extend her head once she swings her arms. You'll need to be strict from the outset, because holding the head at the moment of takeoff in the handspring is one of the hardest movements to grasp. Now, in the phase of opening the body, the hips need to be open, with the pelvis tucked and the buttocks squeezed completely together. This is a position of extension by stretching, and the gymnast must avoid as much as possible uncontrolled and released openings. Then, when she lands, it's best that when the hands are pressing down, they are turned slightly inward, with the fingers facing one another. If your gymnast does not have very flexible shoulders, you can allow her to put her hands down in line with her shoulders. But watch out, beyond this line, if the hands are turned out, be aware that the gymnast will have a very hard time bending her arms if her handspring is too low, and this often causes elbow injury. As for the shoulders, we'll make sure that they're above the hands, with the ears covered and the arms stretched. The gymnast looks down towards the hands, and the body is opened in backward concave position. You will often hear of a forward or backward concave curl, or forward or backward convex curl, especially in reference to a snap down. To understand what these terms mean, let's take the image of a circular sphere. Concave means hollow or curved inward, so this corresponds to the inside part of the sphere. Convex means rounded outward, that is, the outside part of the sphere. When we look at the gymnast's body, we don't refer to the inside or outside, but rather to the front or back of the body. This is why a snap down is the transition from a backward concave curl to a forward concave curl, or a forward convex to a backward convex curl. This opening position will stimulate a movement that is essential in gymnastics, the snap down. This is a ubiquitous movement in our sport, and it shows up in different forms, whether on the floor exercise, vault, or uneven bars, and it is as important as alignment, a handstand, or the gymnast's ability to hold a position. It's a basic movement that we will constantly work on in physical preparation, and its particularity is that it combines muscle elasticity and contraction in order to make the movement more effective. In this case, the snap down is combined with the movement of rebounding on the hands in order to get into standing position. The perfect execution of this movement requires physical strength that is already well developed and that the beginner often lacks. So you will frequently find that when the gymnast is in the extended position, there is an uncontrolled hollow in her back. Then she releases, so there is muscular training to be done here in order to produce an effective opening position. From this position, the gymnast will do the snap down. Generally speaking, the body will move from the backward concave curl to the handstand, then to the forward concave curl while taking off. When it comes to the shoulders, the arm push-off starts as soon as the hands touch the floor. And in the first phase, the gymnast tries to lengthen into a handstand as if she's trying to touch the ceiling with her feet, before finishing the movement by rounding the upper back and finishing the push-off by extending the hands. This movement is very quick and short, and of course it is hard to feel everything, but you must make the gymnast understand that the movement starts from the shoulders and goes toward the feet, and that it is not a fast downswing of the legs towards the floor. It is also clear that there will be a movement in the abdomen and hips in order to round the body, and in that way end up in a forward curl, but this is secondary to the shoulder movement. Perfecting this snap-down will take years, and this is why we will see in the chapter on physical preparation many strengthening exercises for this movement. The other idea to keep in mind is that it will take a lot more time to master the transitions to curls with rebound on the standing back handspring than on the round-off back handspring, because in the standing handspring there is less speed and it requires more power, so you will automatically see more errors. Once you manage to correct these mistakes, the gymnast's ability will easily transfer to the sequence from the round-off.